So today's session, I'm going to share something that it sort of came at me in a rush. There was a few days I was actually doing a lot of it during this quarantine time, and I was doing a lot of these calls like this. And so I was in the field for a few days in a row, and something kept nudging me. And the very first time it happened, I felt so disturbed after the constellation. I could not quite figure out what was going on. What is this thing that was happening? And in that particular constellation, there was a representative. I was working with, I was connected to the client in some way. And there was a representative in the field that said, I just need to be playing with you. That's just the way it is. Get used to it. It wasn't exactly that language, but it was that quality of language. That's just the way it is. Get used to it. And there was, and several of the other representatives were like, yes, that's right. What he says is correct. And it sort of disoriented the field in such a way that we, time came to an end. There was a kind of interesting space that was created through that language. And the client said to me that they felt really unseen, that this was a pattern that they were familiar with inside of themselves, where their work and what they're bringing in the world is often met by people who say, well, you have to fix your language, or you have to do these things, and you have to get used to this. And part of what she was identifying, and she was as a Black woman, she was saying, I want people to see how much this is related to race, to racism. And it really, for me, this landed in me in a way that for a few days, I really sat with and tried to make sense of what is this space that was created. And then I was in another constellation, and we were, as we do, so the sort of the classic movement in constellation, we begin in the present. There's a movement back into the past and a resolution that allows us to align again and be in a new relationship, a new orientation with the future. And in this particular constellation, I found myself, we were being asked to sort of move back to see what was behind. And I actually couldn't go behind. Instead, I find myself sort of resting. I rested during that whole period. Oops, can I say again? Let me see. There's a question here. Okay, I see your question, Logan. I'll talk more about that space in a second. So I found myself not being able to go back, and I was very curious about what this was, and I instead rested for a bit. And when we came back again together, and there's another movement, I kept finding myself in an inquiry with not what was behind, but what was in front. There's a third piece that suddenly left my mind. Let me see if I can get it back. What I found as I explored this some more is that there seems to be, what I was experiencing is what I called at the time 2 futures. And then later someone reminded me that Bibi's husband has actually, Jan Jakob Stam has actually talks about 2 futures, the planned and the emergent future. But this did not feel like the way I was experiencing, this felt a little bit different. This was what I have been calling now the projected future. So the other story I'll tell you about this space is that in 2016, and I don't know if anybody was on here for this, anybody on this call, but in 2016, I helped to organize an event we called Social Alchemy. And we were looking at collective healing, constellations for collective healing. So it was the summer of 2016. And something happened at this amazing event, incredible facilitators, it was beautiful. People really came with their heart to open up this question of collective healing and how constellations can be used to serve in that collective. And instead what happened was the moment we opened it, this tornado came in, this energetic tornado, and there was so much disruption throughout the whole couple of days that we spent together, to the point where I and many of the organizers felt completely wiped out. Like, and I personally felt like, oh, what did I do? I organized this event and it fell apart. Have I harmed people? One of the things that we did, our closing constellation, was about politics. There's politics in the U.S. in particular was represented, and we had, I think, Hillary Clinton represented. I don't even think we considered Donald Trump, and it was in that field, that final field, where there's really this sort of splintering that happened. What I see now is that we were moving into a field that was coming towards us. There was another field coming towards us, and that was the field of Donald Trump and his election. So this emergent future was coming right towards us, and we did not know. None of us planned for that emergent future. It was just going to slam into us. And the thing about Donald Trump's campaign, and you all probably have heard the slogan, "Make America Great Again." So everything he's campaigning on is actually what I'm feeling in the field as the projected future. That I want to continue to drag into the present these things from the past. Or it might say, it's just the way it is, right? That's another voice that the projected future might have. And there's so many ways in which the projected future sort of has where we have attachments to it. And so when I speak about the three futures, what I'm presenting here is for us to take an opportunity to explore what I'm calling now the creative future and the emergent future, but also the projected future, these 3 points in front of us. I'm going to show you my screen now, so hopefully you can see it. If I can find it, just give me a minute to find the document. Okay, here it is. How do I make this better? Okay. So here we have these 3 futures. And when I stepped into this field the very first time, and I did it actually as an exercise with a small group, I called the spot behind me, what's behind us. I didn't really fill it out. And when I went into that spot, I could feel, there's a couple of places back here. And then my friend Marianne Connor, who's on this call and who I consider to be a real thinking partner to me, she and I are, at least for me, I hope for the same for her, but I am constantly inspired by what she brings to me. And so she offered that actually this space here is these two triangles. And so when she felt in the what's behind space, now I've given this a new name. I don't know if this is what she would call it, but these are the words I'm using right now for how I'm feeling these 3 spaces. That there's what I'm calling an entangled past. And then there's our resource, ancestral resource. And ancestral includes not just human ancestor, but also non-human resource. And then the origin point. And so you can see when you look at this, these 6 points, it's actually the origin and the emergent feature are actually the same. There's this, and you can see there's a kind of mirroring in the what's behind and what's in front spot. So I'm going to take a pause just to sort of see if there are any questions or comments. I can go back to Logan to what you were saying. So when I was mentioning the the sort of constellation where I first heard the voice of the projected future that said, this is just the way it is, get used to it. The client was a Black woman who was hearing that voice. There's a bunch of other things that happened. I won't get into all the details, but inside of what was happening in that moment, she was wanting to identify that racism is happening here. This is the way it's functioning, and that there's a kind of blindness to the way it was happening in the field. And the connection I'm making is that there are systems of harm, systems of oppression, systems of extraction. Those systems have a momentum that I'm including in what I'm calling the projected future. And so part of the value in identifying that there is something called the projected future is that it allows us to start to see what are the things that have a momentum that I'm actually blind to. They have become the water that I breathe. I'm sorry, the water that I breathe. The air that I breathe, or the water I swim in. And so I've become, I can't see them. And so many of those things I would say can create the field that I'm calling the projected future.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to invite us. So we have this field. I'm going to propose we work with this in two ways. Are there other? I can take other questions. Feel free to drop a question in the chat box as I speak. I'll attend. But I'm going to propose that we enter this field in two ways. The first one is just personally. So I'm going to invite you to, now I'm going to tell you how I work and you can see what works for you. I like to stand up. So for me, I'm going to stand up in that image that I showed you here. I'm going to place myself in that center point. And I am going to allow myself to move through those points. And the first intention that I want to invite you into is for you just to feel these points for yourself. How are they showing up for you? And so that will be the first inquiry. And then we'll do a second inquiry after that, which I will guide you through. And of course, this structure is just representation. Whatever shape it looks like for you will emerge for you. But this is a useful starting point. So I'm going to invite, I usually have bells and chimes and the things, but I don't have those right now. So instead I'm going to invite us just to sort of take a breath together, a few breaths, just to create some space. I'm going to take a breath. And inside the space, just allow yourself to come into your body and into your room. And to invite this field, the six-pointed field that includes these 3 points behind us and these 3 points in front of us. And then when you're ready, I'm going to invite you to step into this field for yourself and start to feel into these points. And I'll give you a few moments, few minutes to sense, to do some sensing, and then I'll call you back. I'm going to invite you to take some time both working in the field, and then if you have a notebook or want to write, I encourage you to sort of start to, however you like to sort of work with the information. But I encourage you, if you want to write, you can go ahead and do that. But just allow yourself to spend a little bit more time just sensing these spaces. So we have, I want us to be able to do another piece, but I would like to hear, again, either in the chat, but if there's a couple of you, maybe 2 or 3 people who want to share out loud some of their experience, I would love to hear what you noticed. And I can't see everyone, so you might need to, and maybe Raymond, you can help me if anybody's waving their hand or wants to share. Bibi. Yeah.
But are there not more?
But I can hear you.
Okay. I just was thinking, well, first of all, I was also in the former presentation of you, I felt this strong depression of the teachers in the time now. And I realized then I had hope, and this was exactly the hope projected from being representative of the teachers 100 years ago. Mm. So I got the insight, hope is often projected future. Mm. We hope for something from the past.
Wow.
And actually, it reminds me from what Bert Hellinger says, the one who has no hope has everything. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Anyone else? Marianne, did you want to share?
Yeah. So I see the 6 points as like 2 interconnected triangles, as you know, because all my regenerative work triangles are important. And I felt both the projected future and the creative future bowing to the origin point, right? So like sort of deeply imminent in life. Mm. And there was like a deep honoring of the origin point, like, you know, bringing that indigenous wisdom forward in a way, which I can see both in the point that's the projected future, that is a sense of loyalty and honoring of what came before, and in the creative future in terms of where's the wisdom we lost that we could like integrate now. And then it felt like the ancestral resource and the entangled past were both really focused on the emergent future, in the way I've sometimes felt in constellations that our ancestors, at least in my experience, are often kind of saying like, go, 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 like an evolutionary force that really wants us to go beyond them and live into our potential.
And say that again, what were the points that you saw?
So it was interesting because, I mean, at first it looked like, you know, there's the 4 future points and the past points, right? Mm-hmm. But I saw the ancestral resource and the entangled past looking to the emergent future in a transcendent way. Mm-hmm. And the projected future and the creative future both bowing to the origin point. So it makes like a 6-pointed star. Like and then my heart was in the middle.
Yes.
Of that. That makes sense. Yeah.
That does make sense. You're reminding me that there's, so Marianne introduced to me the regenerative, she refers to it as a regenerative design triangle. There really is the 3. You know, you could think of it as the Trinity. It shows up in lots of ways. It shows up as thesis, antithesis, synthesis. But there's also a way in which those 2 points, rather than sort of reconciling in an inclusive way that includes the parts, they can come together in a way that actually is compromised. It sort of is leaving things out. And so I'm sort of feeling that in what you're saying. There's, I think, Jeanette, did you want to, can I see you? I can't see everybody here, but if maybe Jeanette, if you want to say something. Yeah, great.
I tried to follow the bullets, and I felt a landscape. And myself was the middle point. And when I was at the projected future, I was looking at the past. I was also sighted behind rather than looking forward. And I felt frozen.
Mm-hmm.
When I went to the emergent future, it wasn't spotted. It was surrounded. It was universal. It was everywhere. So it didn't matter there was no feeling with it. It was just everywhere. And then I went to the creative future and felt flexible and happy.
Mm-hmm.
And referring to our previous thing, I was thinking of what Bibi was saying as well. Maybe nature is our new guiding principle, our leading principle.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So follow nature. Then I went back by myself to my ancestral resource, and I felt powerful, strengthened. So I think it's more about my parents and their parents, so that they give me the power to more than history of country. It was more personal, I think. And then in the origin, I felt very, very small, and it became smaller and smaller and smaller. That was the only thing. I had this feeling of feeling smaller. And then I went to the entangled past. And then I sensed something, and maybe that's more for everyone, because it's not knowing. And I felt ashamed for not knowing.
Mm.
And maybe this is why we feel so sad, difficult, etc. in the chaos, because we are not knowing, but it's hard to accept not to know, because we should know somehow. And I think if I can be more in that not knowing, I can follow nature as a leading principle.
Thank you so much. It's really beautiful. The not knowing. Yeah. So I want us to inquire in another way now, because this conference, you know, it's coming at this time. It's coming at this time. And in the last session with me, we could feel, someone spoke about a tornado, and that there's a kind of calm in the eye of the storm, but in order to get out of the tornado, you still have to move through this chaotic space. And the other thing that showed up, of course, is that we are actually we are in the middle of this big shift in the field. And so it feels particularly chaotic, as some people are really committed to the projected future. And we can see what are the ways in which the projected future and the entangled past are mirroring each other. And we can, so there's all these different sort of reflections and mirroring, and the landscape, is that what it's called? That space that you were mentioning, Jeanette. So the question for us is, what is our place in our work? We came in with our, Jane opened us with our breakthrough questions. And one of the things I see as we carry the breakthrough questions is that part of where that question guides us is also orienting us to places in the field. And I think a lot about, as I've been playing with these 6 points and the 3 futures, but these 6 points, one of the things I'm seeing is that some of us, there's a kind of the psychopomp. There's the role of those who are involved in transitions. And then there's those of us who are really involved in activating and aligning with the creative and emergent space. And then there are those of us who are really looking to include death. I mean, that really is part of what's happening in this bigger field when we look both in the future and in the behind, the projected future and entangled past, but also humans, you know, and lives. That there's this expanded space now in which we're really being called to include death. And that also means that we're being called to include those of us who have some relationship with death and supporting a transition. So I bring that in, and plus everything else that you're bringing in through your hearts. And I'm going to invite, let's see, I had a few different ideas for this, but maybe we'll do it and also in our private space again. So here's my suggestion. I'm going to have you close your eyes for this, and we'll do it more visually, inner eye or guided visualization. So I invite you to close your eyes and make yourself in a comfortable, grounded, and alert space. And allow yourself for these 6 points to open up in an inner field. You can place first the points behind you, these 3 points in the past, what we're calling the past. We call it the entangled past, the resource past, the ancestral resource, and the origin point in the behind us space. So just feel those spaces of there. And just see what it feels like as you feel them behind you. And then allow these 3 spaces to open up in front of you. A projected future. A creative future. And an emergent future. And now, almost as if for some reason it feels like it's in my pocket, but there's I'm finding myself pulling out of my pocket this is the question I've written, the thing that I feel called, and just see what happens as you bring in your calling into this space. And invite your calling to guide you to your place in this relationship. See where it points you. Between these 3 points behind us and these 3 points in front of us. And then I want to invite you to see if you can take this question that you've been carrying. What happens if you let it go? If you drop it into the emergent future, if you let it dissolve into the imaginal cells that become something new. And then notice if there's another impulse that arises. I'm going to invite you to take some deep breaths here and just breathe. As we begin to come back into this room together. Taking with us what we have received from this inquiry. And when you're ready, I invite you to open your eyes and come back into our shared space. So I think we're going to close here, this moment, this constellation. I just, thank you. I want to thank you all for engaging in this inquiry, and I am happy for the gift that we've received in this, from the messages that we've received from this space, because I feel it prepares us, and that's really what our intention is here. How do we prepare ourselves for what's next? Even if that preparation means just being in the not knowing, that's really, but for me, that's what I received in that space, is that as I took my question and allowed it to kind of dissolve into the imaginal cell, I could feel myself resting in that not knowing space. And then I felt an arising of a new impulse, like there was this kind of creation showed up again and wanted to move again. So there was this lovely new movement space that emerged. Thank you all so much.